O Lord, give me the tongue of the learned, that I may know what I ought to say. And if there be any word good for the use of edifying, give it, that thou mayest minister grace unto the hearers. Grant that I may speak boldly. Grant I open my mouth wide, O Lord. Do thou fill it. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. This first Sunday in Lent, I would like to take a look at sin. God formed Adam from the dust of the ground, like a child making mud pies with freedom and love. And then when he finished, he stepped back and admired his work. One more thing would make it better. And he breathed into Adam's nostrils his own spirit, the breath of life. And the man became a living creature. No longer was he part of the earth, because now he has the Spirit of God in him. But neither is he God, because he was made by God. He is the Lord of all creation, because he has in him the Spirit of God, and in him all things are gathered together. And God gives him the task of guarding and keeping creation safe. He has the ability to make his own decisions. He has the ability to discern, to know the repercussions of his actions. So in order to give Adam boundaries and to test his resolve, God gives Adam a single rule. Don't eat of the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And just like any one of us, Adam pushes his boundaries a little too far. He eats the fruit given to him by his wife after she had already taken a bite. Together, they committed one of the most boneheaded mistakes ever. But look for a minute at what Eve says when the serpent inquires about the fruit. The serpent asked, "Did God actually say, 'You shall not eat of any tree in the garden'?" Eve replies, "We may eat of the fruit of the trees in the garden, but God said, 'You shall not eat of the fruit of the tree that is in the midst of the garden, neither shall you touch it, lest you die.'" Eve has just done what all of us do. She interprets the rules for her own and makes it more difficult on herself. She remembers all the parts that are easily kept, that they may eat of any tree in the garden. But the part that is difficult, she generalizes and makes vague. She refuses to name what could cause her to sin. She has, in effect, made it more intriguing by doing this. This is the one tree which shall not be named. God said, "You shall not eat of the fruit." God said, "You shall not eat of the tree that is in the midst of the garden, neither shall you touch it, lest you die," she says. And by doing this, she has already done most of the work for the serpent. The taboo she places on the tree's name becomes for her the center of gravity. The tree that is actually defined as being in the midst of the garden is not the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, but the tree of life. Life is the tree that defines the garden. But she has placed her taboo tree, the tree that must not be named, at the center, and thus redefine the center. Now we can see why when Jesus refines the understanding of the commandments, he focuses not on actions, but in thinking. Eve has already redefined the entirety of the garden in her mind from one giving life, one that has life at its center, to one that gives death, one that has death at its center. I wonder what would be so awful about eating that fruit. Why would it cause me to die? It must be the most wonderful tasting fruit here. I mean, I know all of these fruits. I eat them all the time, but their flavor has become boring to me. But I cannot have that one. No, I must. I can't even touch it. I can't even name it. And by doing this, she has placed a barrier around it. This is now the only barrier that matters in her life. Sure, there may be other boundaries around the garden, but why would they matter? Nothing out there could kill her. Or if they could, God would have made a rule about it. No, this is the only boundary that matters. So don't go near it. We can see that in her mentality, though she has walled it off by refusing to name it or even be near enough to touch it, she has actually placed a searchlight that constantly beckons her to it. The circumstances are perfect for the serpent to come to her. All he does is give her license to be able to obtain her heart's desire, that forbidden fruit. You shall not surely die. The fruit will no longer kill her. So in her mentality, how dare God keep this knowledge for himself? Once the boundaries were removed, Eve did not hesitate. So when the woman saw that the tree was good for food, and that it was a delight to the eyes, and that the tree was to be desired to make one wise, she took the fruit and ate it. And she gave some to her husband who was with her, and he ate. All of this in a horrible parody of the Eucharist. Eve is for us an example of what happens when the commands of God are interpreted in ways suited to us. We tend to massage the rule so that it only gives life, it only gives blessing, but blurs that which actually harms. Take the practice of giving up chocolate for Lent. Chocolate in and of itself is a good thing. A little sweet, a little boost of energy, a little brain boost, a little mood enhancer. Plenty of benefits can come with just a little bit of chocolate. Moderation, however, is the key. But we become gluttonous of this gift from God, and we eat all the chocolate in one sitting. So it's not chocolate that is bad, but the overindulgence of chocolate. But in Lent, we try to discipline ourselves. So, no chocolate. We have thrown the baby out with the bathwater, because the real problem is not chocolate, but overeating chocolate. So rather than dealing with the actual problem, we set a barrier around it. And just like Eve, we also place a searchlight there that draws us to it. If we would instead discipline ourselves one little bit and no more, this removes that searchlight by demystifying it. This is the first Sunday in Lent, and so there's plenty of opportunity to now take time and deeply probe and examine what it is that you really want to accomplish during Lent. If it is combating overindulgence, work on moderation instead of complete abstinence, because that thing which is given up will only be shifted for a time to something else if we're not careful. Strawberry ice cream instead of chocolate ice cream. Starchy foods for sweet foods. The gluttony will still be utilized by that crafty serpent. But then the buildup of pressure and the self-delusion will happen in the midst of the unguarded gluttony. Then, as with Eve, the serpent will present an opportunity, and all of a sudden, sin on top of sin will occur. The best way to combat sin is to allow it to keep its proper name. That way, the serpentine subtlety has that much less to work with. So enjoy Lent. Work hard. because we are preparing to be ready to meet Christ in his resurrection. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the